Okay, welcome everybody to the Practical Tanya. Today's a very special class because we're doing chapter 12. Why is chapter 12 so special? I mean, every chapter is special. Every chapter has a special theme. But why is this chapter so important? And the reason is because this chapter 12 is like ends the main thesis of the Alter Rebbe, at least his first major breakthrough point. We built up till here. We spoke chapters 1 through 8. We went through, explain animal soul, divine soul. We talked about how you have insides of the soul, which is the intellect and emotions. You have outsides, you have garments, 3 garments, thought, speech, and action. That applies both to the divine soul and to the animal soul. Last week, and we mentioned that there is a war. In chapter 9, we mentioned there's a battle of each of these 2 souls with all their sophisticated personalities. They are both waging war to conquer the city being the body. And we spoke about what that means. Each one is trying to make the body enact or live out its garments, its expressions. Animal soul is its thought, speech, action garments, and divine soul is its thought, speech, action garment. It's very important to remember that according to the Tanya, it's, I'm just going to mute everybody so you don't need to unmute yourself. It's very important to remember that it's, it's either or. Either you're exercising the animal soul or you're exercising the godly soul. And that is very important to realize. You're doing one or the other at any given time. We spoke last week about the definitions of tzaddik and rasha. Tzaddik and rasha is tzaddik and rasha is not like we typically think. We typically translate as good guy or bad guy. And the way the Tanya says is no, tzaddik is someone who vanquished their negative, their yetzer hara, their animal soul, and there's no pull towards negative thought, speech, or action. At that point, it's natural to only do good. The rasha is someone who, a very wide spectrum, someone who gives into their animal soul, even in thought, which is pretty much all of us. At some, we can relate to people that, we're not perfect at one point or another, or constantly at different levels and measures. We're giving in to the animal soul. The animal soul is any selfish or negative expression of thought, speech, and action. If you did that, or it's very likely that you will do that, even a very little bit, that is the way Tanya defines a rasha. It backs it up with its definition. It backs up its definition. So chapter 12 is important because chapter 12 is telling you the ultimate goal for the average person, for the regular person. To be a tzaddik, that you are naturally only wanting to do good in your thought, speech, and action. That's not even a goal for the vast majority of people. We said there could be a few tzaddikim, a few people in a generation that are at that level. And the vast majority, the millions, the billions of people, but in the Jewish community, we're talking what? 14 million people. the vast majority of them, what is their ultimate goal? What does God want from them? Want from each and every one of us? And the Tanya in chapter 12 says is to be a Beinoni. Beinoni. A Beinoni literally means the middleman, one who's, half and half. We proved, if you remember, in chapter 1, that it can't be half and half for various reasons. It doesn't make sense. And we just talked last week, right? It's tzaddik is perfection inside and outside. In Russia, is someone who has imperfect insides, and occasionally or more allows that to express itself on the outside. The Beinoni is the ultimate goal. It's achievable, yet it is a big undertaking to do. What is it? So first of all, you don't have to have perfect insides. You could have imperfect insides. You could have an animal soul that is healthy and wants things, whether they're, it can have a human impulse to pleasure, and that pleasure can be indulging in thought, speech, or action, whether it's it's light, sinful thought, speech, or action, or heavy. The point is you have an animal soul. You have that drive that will go towards that. So that's all of us, the vast majority of us. And it's saying, no, you could have that. That's okay. That's okay that you don't have a perfect animal soul that's, eliminated. That's okay. A Beinoni is though someone who in thought, speech, and action does not allow their animal soul to have expression. And it will only allow, the Beinoni will only allow the expression, the outsides, to be dictated by the divine soul. So the insides are imperfect, the outsides are perfect behavior. So that is I'm just reading my notes. The three garments. When we say animal soul, what do we mean the animal soul? We mean the urge, and then we mean the giving into the urge. So the urges the Beinoni has, the giving into the urges to act in thought, speech, or action based on your animal soul, which at the core is self-serving. A sin can be a big expression of self-servingness, but the animal soul, the Beinoni will not allow the animal soul to get its way. In the parable of the two kings, you have we said that tzaddik is someone who basically, there's a war, divine soul and animal soul. They're vying, they're battling for control of the city, the body. Each one has a unique strategy, right? We said the animal soul is passion and emotion. And it feels good, it has that up its sleeve. The divine soul knows what's right. It exercises its intellectualism, its moral compass, in its brain, its knowledge, subjective knowledge of right and wrong, and it will use that to get its execution of the body according to that. So the tzaddik basically is when the divine soul eliminates the enemy. The enemy, the animal soul is eliminated, that is the tzaddik, right? The divine soul, that king, controls the body and has no worry of the animal soul or enemy coming in to vanquish it. Either it's a complete tzaddik and actually converted the animal soul and its passion to further the aims of the divine soul. That's the highest level possible, imaginable. Or it's the incomplete tzaddik where there's a minute amount of animal soul, but it's so flooded with it's so bottle, it's so nullified to the ratio of goodness and divine soul flowing that it doesn't actually have any practical expression. So basically, the tzaddik eliminates the enemy. The rasha is one who did not eliminate the enemy. The animal soul and divine soul are still battling. On top of that, the rasha, the way the tzaddik defines rasha, is one where the enemy makes breaches into the city, into the body, in the thought, speech, or action. So they can be once every decade, or not, whatever, it can be very infrequent and very minor breaches of the animal soul into the body. And that's still a rasha, right? There's still the battle and there's a breach of the animal soul into the body. It could be a very frequent breach of the animal soul, and that's also a rasha. At the most extreme, it could be someone who literally gives in to the animal soul, is primarily controlling the situation, is controlling the body, and it's even pushed away the divine soul being very subconscious, which is an extreme case, perhaps not even, might be a theoretical case to show the poles of the spectrum, but you get the idea. The rasha has a constant battle and loses sometimes. The Beinoni, with this parable, is one who has the battle, did not eliminate the enemy. The animal soul still is lurking, it still is conniving to get its expression through the body. But the divine soul of the Beinoni allows the divine soul to have extreme control and is always on the offense and defense to never allow the animal soul to make a breach into the body, into the thought of the person, the speech of the person, and the action of the person. There's never a breach by the Beinoni. Because every time it notices that the enemy, the animal soul, is coming, is trying, is an urge, a pop-up window comes, the Beinoni knows what it is and immediately will lock it out, will push it away. It says later in time, they'll push with two hands. And that is a Beinoni. If you look in the text, if you have the text in front of you, I'm going to answer the question in a moment. The Beinoni never allows the evil to get enough momentum to actually act by that. And all the Beinoni does, its day-to-day, its life is filled with the garments of the divine soul. The garments of the divine soul are mitzvahs, Torah and mitzvahs, as we said. Torah for thinking, and speech and action for all the other 613 mitzvahs. It says an interesting concept, if you noticed, about the Beinoni being this fantastic achievement. It says how the Beinoni, once he reaches the level of Beinoni, has never sinned before and never will sin. And we can be confident that even for a moment in his life, he will never be a rasha. He'll never sin. Now, wait a second. How is that possible? Doesn't it say in Ethics of the Fathers, a person should never be sure of themselves to the day they die? Because you can never be sure of yourself. We always have to be vigilant. So what it means is that when you reach the level of Beinoni and have proven that you don't allow the animal soul to ever go in, obviously you've done enough repentance, teshuvah, for your past times when you weren't a Beinoni. So that's wiped clean. And we can be reasonably assured that this person, the way they are right now, if they'll just keep up this technique, will not sin. You always have free choice to give up a technique, but they've mastered a technique, a internal technique, where they do not allow the animal soul to have any expression. Everything is done for the right reason, or is done as anytime there's a decision, there's a moral choice, it'll think, what does the divine soul want, and it will execute upon that. The only thing is, it ends off the first section, the Beinoni should not think that he is a tzaddik. What do you mean? He's perfect behavior. And the reason you shouldn't think he's a tzaddik is because tzaddik is not just perfect behavior. A tzaddik doesn't even desire to do bad, because literally the animal soul has been vanquished. And that is, of course, for very, very select individuals in Jewish generation, in Jewish history, is not what is commanded the majority of us. So we had some questions. How about Moses? What was his status? What was he a Beinoni? So I want to just actually throw it out there to everybody. What do you think? Would you think Moses was a tzaddik or a Beinoni, based on what we spoke about?
Well, it's Howard here. Considering that he killed somebody, doesn't that make him a Beinoni? Or does he become a tzaddik through the accumulation of all of his other deeds?
Well, we said if you do something wrong, you're not a tzaddik. It's not like 99% of the time. It's like, imagine like this. I fall asleep at the wheel 1 out of 100 nights. You want to drive with me at night? It's 1 out of 1,000 times I've fallen asleep at the wheel. You know, certain things, I mean, this is just an example of certain things. We can understand that you need a bet, you have to have 100% perfect record. We don't say, well, you know, you sometimes, you know, crash the car because you fall asleep. So it's not an exact example, but a tzaddik is someone who literally never sins or doesn't even want to sin. About your example that he killed somebody,
was justifiable.
Justifiable, it was self-defense of another person, right? Isn't that a mitzvah? It's not only that's allowed, that's a mitzvah, what he did. He took the hard choice. He had to run away for his life, and from being part of the Egyptian aristocracy, he did the right thing there. So I think that example, that's actually a good thing he did. There's other things you can wonder about Moshe, right? He struck the rock, things that were considered like a sin. You can wonder, but of course, there's different ways to look at Moshe's sins. In general, the way Hasidism views the righteous biblical characters is that when it says a sin, it's typically not a sin like he just, you know, allowed his anger to overcome him. It was he is a tzaddik, but within tzaddik he made not the best decision. He made a other decision, which wasn't. My point is the way Moses would be categorized according to Tanya and Hasidism, Moses was a tzaddik. You want to ask me, he did some sins? So Hasidic and Kabbalistic philosophy would say those were not sins. He needed a surface to sin. But if you really understand the background, the medrash and this, that, it's not a sin from a going against God, it was a sin as in a lacking in a decision he was doing for God. But he was
Which
always
sin are you talking about? Which sin are you referring to?
hitting the rock, you could say.
That had to be, why wasn't that a sin? I think it was both Moses and Aaron sinned so badly. It wasn't clear to anybody what was happening, but they sinned so badly, I think, that they couldn't go into the promised land.
So it's a very good point, and there's a lot of discussion about it. In general, when you look at, again, how do we look at the stories in the Torah? Do we look at them as in, they did something wrong and they got a big punishment? Yeah, that is a way to look at it. But typically, forgetting in Hasidism and Kabbalah, even Talmud and Medrash, the commentaries, will explain that there's much more going on. There's much more going on than just if you read the verses straight. It's a lot more depth. You don't even have to go into Kabbalistic Hasidic philosophy. You can literally just read, basic commentaries on the Torah, and they're going to explain it way more nuanced and holier than one would think. They just, simple Joe. It's not like that's that. Is the animal soul an enemy because it cannot be trusted? Well, let me go out, Carol. I'll do your second question because it was in continuation of the conversation. Didn't Moses go through a transformation? Absolutely. I think Moses did go through a transformation.
Which transformation are you referring to?
Does a tzaddik go through a transformation? Do they grow? I would think a tzaddik grows. You can grow even if you are, let's say you're being ruled by your divine soul. You can still grow. There's greater heights. We say the soul in heaven, infinite growing, because there's infinite closeness to God and understanding of what that means. So, Moshe is definitely on a transformation. Now, I think if you watch movies, Prince of Egypt and the Ten Commandments, in general, Hollywood or storylines, the way we're used to is that the whole thing is a character has to have a transformation. So we expect, if we read something in the Torah, it's also going to be, someone will transform to become better and better till they really get it. So I think the more accurate, in the way we would understand Moses, is that Moshe didn't have a transformation. He had it depends how you use the word transformation. He was a tzaddik. I believe he was born a tzaddik. It talks about how he was light in the at the same time, Moshe definitely grew. He definitely had milestones in his role as a leader of the Jewish people. So that's about Moses. But then the other question was, is the animal soul an enemy because it cannot be trusted? I think it's an enemy not only because it can't be trusted. I think it is an enemy. What's the goal? The goal is to do your divine mission in this world in the fullest way every single day. Every opportunity is a way to express the divine soul and to bring out the divine spark of the situation or the thing encountered. The animal soul is trying to stop that. The animal soul is a veil on a person achieving their daily mission or hourly mission or every minute mission.
Wouldn't be here without the animal soul, so I don't understand.
So first of all, is a tzaddik, we talk about this, the theoretical concept. A tzaddik, right? Do they have an animal soul? They don't, yet they're here. So I'm not saying we don't have a purpose for animal soul, but you can have theoretically a no animal soul. But typically, yes, we do have an animal soul, and that is how we survive because we have natural built-in survival instinct. So animal soul is not a bad thing, but it's a selfish thing. And every selfish urge or justification or whatever is there's an internal voice trying to stop the divine soul, the selfless expression, the divine expression. That is its goal. That's the goal of the animal soul. We said the end of chapter, I think it was end of chapter 9. Just double check. Yeah, we said God gives us an animal soul. And in quotes from the Kabbalah, one of the reasons Kabbalah, the Zohar, brings down, gives the parable of the king and his son, the prince. The king's trying to test the prince. And the prince was like an incredible guy, really spectacular, moral, kind guy. And the king wanted to test to see how moral and kind this prince really is. So he hired a harlot to try and seduce him. But and the harlot knew that the whole goal was as a test. Yet the harlot tried very hard to give him that test. But ultimately the prince overcomes the test and the king is overjoyed because now he sees that all the goodness of the prince is for real and the kingdom is in good hands for the next generation. So the animal soul is in that parable, it's like the seducer trying to get you to make a mistake and make a lapse in your mission or being true to your good character. That is its goal. Yes, so answer to Carol, that's why the animal soul is an enemy. Its whole purpose is, why don't we say its whole purpose? We'll see later, there's a lot more depth to the animal soul and a lot more beauty in the transformation of the animal soul. Don't just view it as like a snake or as this like, wicked, seducer. That's one aspect of it. There's gonna be more intrinsic beauty and depth in the animal soul's transformation. It's not just like, oh, we want the divine soul to be, prove that it can last, even its connection to God, even in a physical, hidden world. So the animal soul comes to test it in this hidden world where godliness is hidden. And when you overcome it, great, the divine soul is fantastic. It seems there's no purpose of the animal soul. Later we'll see the animal soul in itself has some purpose. So that is, I'd say, why the animal soul is enemy. And of course, do not trust your enemy, because your enemy can be really brilliant to trip you up. It isn't just like a buffoon trying to trip you up. It'll be a secret agent infiltrate into your deepest needs or self-concept. Don't trust the enemy. The enemy has the opposite agenda. Okay. How do I know what my mission is? How do I know what my mission is? It's a good question. We could have class. We should have a class. I think we've given classes on that before. I think there's a couple of indicative things to tell us what our mission is. First of all, divine providence typically will put a person in the situation where their mission is. Meaning, if you live in a certain town, that's where your mission is. If you're born in a certain family, that's a big part of what your mission is going to be about. If you're born Jewish, that's your mission is to do Jewish mitzvahs. If you're not Jewish, your mission typically is to do the 7 Noahide laws. And that's what one's mission is. What job to get, those are details. But we said before, the mission is given to you, the oath, the soul's given, administer an oath. Be a tzaddik, don't be a rasha. Yes, someone raised their hand. Or was that a mistake?
I was leaving a message, but I can just ask you. First of all, so going back to Moses, does that mean a tzaddik can be an imperfect person, Or is the idea that a tzaddik has no imperfections?
A tzaddik, the way I would say is a tzaddik's imperfect is not what you're thinking imperfect. When you mean imperfect person, you mean a person who makes a legitimate mistake, a sin of some sort.
Yeah, makes mistakes.
But a mistake could be there's a mistake of like only giving out 100, running through your day, giving out 100 boxes of food to poor people, and you could have given 101. Or there's a mistake like you gossiped about somebody. There's different mistake levels, or you think God wanted you to, you legitimately. So the answer that tzaddik cannot, the way you mean imperfect person, no, a tzaddik cannot be an imperfect person.
All right, so let me ask you this. Whether Moses kills somebody justifiably or not, he kills somebody, right? So that strikes me as a mistake that it seems like there's a justification. If anybody else had gone and killed somebody and meant it in all, with all the righteous reasoning of like, well, this person was being oppressed and I stood in, and in the heat of the moment, I killed the person to rescue the other person. It seems like that person would not, that it would sort of like that crime would be against them.
No.
Yeah, but there's a difference between murder and killing.
That's a
Thou shalt not murder.
What about Aaron's son Pinchas? He killed 2 people with 1 spear, and he was rewarded for it by God.
Oh,
Susan, you had a question before I answer?
There's a difference between killing and murder. It's
Breaking up a little bit, Susan. There's a difference in killing and murder. I mean, again, there's a concept in halacha called a rodef. A rodef means a pursuer. If you see someone with a machete running down the street trying to hurt somebody else, you, bystander, have a moral obligation to take out that person's machete. If you can do it without killing the person, that's best. But if it's needed to kill the person, you have an obligation to kill the pursuer. So Moshe, in that case,
so the idea is, in that case, Moshe had no other choice but to actually kill the person.
Exactly.
Okay.
It wasn't like he was being overly brutal or anything. It was, it was, again, imagine. I'm just trying to think. I mean, I have to go through some of the sources to give you more like, that's how I would understand it. But imagine a Nazi beating a Jew in the Warsaw Ghetto for fun, and the guy's losing his life. You see he's beating him badly and he's not stopping. And based on precedent, it's very well this Nazi will continue and finish the job. And, that's what it was.
So it actually dovetails in the other question I had, which is the whole discussion of battle. I was starting to type this, but forget it. The whole discussion of battle, it seems sort of antithetical to sort of a higher understanding of what a tzaddik would have meant. Like it seems like if you were that wise and that good, you can find other solutions. And the idea of battle seems more of an animal soul thing. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So I'm just making sure you understood. He said a tzaddik does not have a battle. He won the battle. There is no battle. He's done. Tzaddik has vanquished the dragon. There's no more animal soul to bother.
Okay, so the tzaddik never had to go to battle.
No more battle for him. He won.
Okay.
The Beinoni, the Russia has the battle, and there's breaches. The Beinoni were saying this is a very intense idea, the Beinoni has inner battle, but is always successful at propelling the enemy from getting its way.
And what is the part of the soul of the Beinoni that repels that evil? Is that the Rasha? Is that its godly soul, or is that partly
Godly
its
soul? So we said earlier, actually, a good question was, we say you have a choice always between animal soul and godly soul, right? There's like a choice, right? Any action, mitzvah, selfish, selfless, mitzvah, sin, right? Who's choosing? So we said there's really a concept, a way to look at it is a third soul, the intellectual soul, the nefesh hasichlit. That's the chooser, the observer. So your consciousness soul, which really could be a part of the animal soul, by the way. It doesn't have to be a third thing. You could say it's like the intellect, the objective human intellect of the animal soul is like choosing which way to go to like base more emotion or go to higher. But for practical purposes, they say it's a third soul, it's choosing. But what gives the Beinoni, the chooser, its choosing, ability to choose always? Is your question, what's the guy eating for breakfast? Like, how is he able to have the battle yet always choose? Is that your question? Choose right?
I guess it's the idea of battle is that I could see the animal part being the animal soul and the wicked part being interested in that kind of conflict. But it seems like the higher thinking part, the what I would connect with more of a godly soul would see some other option beyond battle, right? And so the idea that the terminology is battle, it just strikes me as sort of antithetical to sort of the bigger.
Right. I hear your point. So I think we're actually going to learn there's different stages in the way the divine soul deals with the animal soul. And whether as the whole, its life approach, or even in every area of life, how it deals with it. We're going to learn, now we're learning the beginning. We will ultimately learn that the goal is to utilize your intellect to bring the animal soul as much as possible, knowing that it could trip up, but to convert parts of the animal soul. Not like the tzaddik that literally like wipes away its selfish drive, but the divine soul will, it's like civilizing a person, right? Like originally you become, a kid's very selfish, but you teach like there's really like beauty in being more collective or be more civilized. Like you can train the animal soul to go along with at least certain parts of the divine soul's agenda. So that's ultimately the goal. We'll learn about that as we go along Tanya. Right now we're talking, I think it's very important. This point here is, let's say you don't feel good. This is a very important point. And I want to move on a little bit and then I'll take more questions because this is going to fit more well the idea that so we say that always the natural way of the Beinoni, natural, before you get advanced levels, battle. Divine soul, animal soul are battling, but the divine soul wins. There's sometimes you have a respite from the battle. When is a spiritual time? Prayer and saying the Shema in the morning and the evening. We have a mitzvah to say the Shema twice a day. And prayer. When a Beinoni prays, they know that mystically in the supernal realms, it's called the time of Mochin de Gadlut, which means when the Sephirot, the cosmos, so to speak, we spoke about, the intellectual cosmos, part of the cosmos, is begadlut. It's like it's broadened, which means that there's more godliness opportunity to feel God's closeness, and with the right meditation, and with thinking, praying, with learning before meditating, and praying and getting into it, you can actually forget your animal soul for that time. This is an achievement. I can't say I do this on a regular Tuesday or even know if I've ever done this, but it's saying the average person can take prayer as a time to really even like the animal soul be quieted for that amount of time, which is why it's very important. I say, even if you don't get that feeling by prayer, you should just know Kabbalah is saying prayer is a time when you can be a tzaddik. So we should have a class on prayer. All right, but very important rule. But the rest of the day, or majority of the Beinoni's life, the animal soul is at bay. It's right at the door. But and the Beinoni will never allow those urges to be dwelt on. So let's say you have a thought where you want to think negative thoughts, or you want to speak negatively, you want to do something negative, even if it's a white lie or a white gossip, whatever you call it. or to have pleasures, to dwell on fantasizing on just executing pleasures, even doing them or thinking them. It will not allow it. It's like a pop-up window. A pop-up window, click here for whatever. The Beinoni looks at its thoughts and says, no, I'm not gonna pop up. I'm gonna close it out. How does it do that? And it says a very important trick. The secret of the Beinoni is, it says that there's a natural rule of a human being. The brain rules the heart. Moach shalit al halev. A human being is unique. It's built in. You don't have to be a tzaddik. You don't have to be a spiritual giant. You have a human ability that the brain can control the heart. And if you know something is not right, yet you want it, there's a natural ability of mind control over giving into that pleasure, that emotion, that desire. That is the first secret of how this is humanly possible for a person to have perfect behavior. How could that be? How could that be? The answer is, if you know what's right and wrong, and yet, of course, we still desire to do what's wrong at times because we're human, because we have an animal soul. You can say, nonetheless, I'm going to choose to do what I know is right and not give into what I want in my heart. And you can divert your mind to do something else, right? We know a human being can, besides not doing what's wrong or speaking what's wrong, you can say, I can choose to fantasize about X wrong thing, or I can choose to do something else that's right. And another just trick, I'll answer some questions in a moment. King Solomon alluded to this in Kohelet. He says, and I saw there's an advantage to wisdom over stupidity. Just like there's an advantage of light over darkness. Again, I saw there was an advantage to wisdom over stupidity, just like there's an advantage of light over darkness. Now, King Solomon was the wisest of all men. Does it take the wisest of all men to tell you that wisdom is better than stupidity? And that he has to give an analogy, it's like light, the advantage of light over darkness. It's self-understood. Stupidity is bad, wisdom is good. So what was he saying there? He was saying as follows. Just like we see naturally that light has a certain power greater than darkness, that a little bit of light can push away a lot more darkness, right? One little match can light up a room. We see it. So too, in the battle of foolishness and wisdom, which foolishness refers to the animal soul. It's called the Melech Zakin Uksil, the veteran and foolish king. That's what it's called. I think King Solomon says it elsewhere. The veteran foolish king. That's referring to the animal soul and its whims. You might think, wow, it's pounding. It wants you to do the heart, the saying, do what you want, passion. King Solomon is saying, yet we see that the human mind, the wisdom, has a lot more power of controlling the whims of the heart, of the animal soul, just quantitatively. Because you could really, really want something, but your mind can say, nonetheless, I'm not going to do that. This is one of the advantages the divine soul has over the godly, the divine soul has over the animal soul, that you have this human ability that your mind can control your behavior, even when your desires are otherwise. And that is, of course, we'll elaborate on the Beinoni because easier said than done. But the fact is, we all do this. We all behave in many times what we know is right, even when we don't feel like it. An example, a parent that's in a grocery store, and the kid, he tells the child, he or she tells the child that, this, what you did there, you really have to control yourself. And the kid starts throwing a tantrum or starts pulling things off the shelves after repeated warnings, and it's so embarrassing. And the parent goes, runs out of apologizes to the manager, and runs out with the kid to the parking lot. And in the parking lot, the parent is fuming, really angry about how this kid really just, this 8-year-old kid was just misbehaving and not listening. And the parent goes and is not yelling in the parking lot, but once the parent gets to the car, starts yelling at the kid, how could you do that? I gave you so many warnings, you embarrassed us, and it was just, how could you, right? And then the parent noticed that there's someone parked next to him watching him. And suddenly the parent stops and drives away. This story actually happened to somebody, and they were using it as a metaphor for Tanya, that did the parent really want to to criticize the child in public? Yes. Were they justifiably angry? Perhaps. Did the kid deserve to be criticized? Maybe. But did the parent do that in public? No. Probably why? Because they knew that it was socially unacceptable. The mind knew that that desire was at that time socially unacceptable and therefore controlled it. In private, maybe it's in the parent's mind, it was more acceptable to criticize or yell at the child, and therefore did it. Once the parent noticed someone that's watching, bam, stopped it. The mind said, this is not acceptable, stop. Isn't that incredible? The parent really was upset. Yet the parent was able to control themselves when they were in public. So too, many of us, we have many things we want to say, we want to do, but our mind, when it knows it's just unacceptable, it will not do that. The mind has a natural control over the heart. And that is the Beinoni's ability. It mentions a cool thing though, that fringe on free choice, because how could the divine soul have this? How could the divine soul have this ability that the godly soul, the animal soul doesn't? You're giving an advantage. It's not equal. So because everything is, it's like a seesaw. So this divine soul has the advantage of mind controlling the heart ability. It's built into every human being. But the animal soul has an advantage that its desires are very tangible, right? Its desires are much easier. The Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev, a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe, said, you know, he was a great defender of Jewish people. He always would be like the heavenly lawyer for the Jewish people. Many stories about that. And he one time was talking to God, you know, rhetorically, before the high holidays, and says, God, you have to give the good Jews a good year. Because why? You told them what to do in the Torah. And that's in a book. And you give them all these temptations physically in their face. So it's not fair. You put all the mitzvahs and the moral behaviors in a book, and you put all the temptations in a physical incarnation in front of them. How about this, God? Put all the physical temptations in a book, make it theoretical, and put all the goodness and mitzvahs, make that physically, tangibly palpable. So that's the advantage the animal soul has. One more story about the animal soul. There was once a Hasidic master, the Maggid of Mezrich, or Dover of Mezrich. He had a student who was complaining that he was plagued during prayer or other times with animal soul thoughts that would pop in. This was, of course, this was a top of the line scholar, someone who really was a righteous person, really working on himself, and it bothered them. Why can't I master myself? Why is I have these, these negative thoughts in my mind? It was during prayer or whatever. So the Maggid sent him to another student, a contemporary of his, I think it was Rabbi Aaron of Karlin. And he said, go to him, travel to him. He lives a journey away. Go there. He'll be able to answer you. So he travels there. It was in the winter. He takes his horse and buggy. He goes there. And he gets there. It's it's nighttime, and he knocks on the door. Now, no answer. Now he sees there's candlelight in the window, so he's knocking, and it's cold, and he traveled. This is the only house around. He's knocking. Please let me in. Let me in. After first he was very polite, but after like an hour, he's really getting cold and it's dangerous. He's like knocking frantically, not being let in. An hour goes by, 2 hours, and that's it. He has to build a little fire to stay warm tonight because he's not being let in. The next morning, the door opens, and the Rabbi Aaron of Karlin, this rabbi, he says, "Oh, welcome in, come in." Puts him up. He's in a beautiful room, and gives him what to eat, and he says, "What did you come here for?" After the guy ate, he says, "Well, I heard you're a great Hasidic, master, and I'm trying to learn how to master my thoughts." How does one master the thoughts? He says, "I answered you already." What do you mean? He says, "Last night you were knocking in. Did I let you in?" "I didn't let you in. I didn't do that because I'm a bad host. I was trying to teach you a lesson. Just because you have a bad thought or you have a desire that's knocking at your door, you don't have to let it in. You don't have to dwell on it. You can just, as the Tanya says, push it away with 2 hands." And that story exactly is how what we're talking about. Again, this idea is not a spiritual power. This is a human psychological power. The mind rules the heart. The fact that many times we don't lose control, we give up control. There's always a choice, even when it's very hard. I'm not putting, we all have hard choices. Many of us have kids that are hard, push buttons, or people in our lives that push buttons. We always have a choice, even when it's really hard, of how to respond. Because even if a person is wronging us, our response can be done by a divine soul way or a losing control way. Because again, the Beinoni proves this. The Beinoni is the one who has perfect behavior even when their insides are difficult. I have to go in a minute, so I'm going to take a couple questions. I'm going to the questions about Pinchas. The idea there was Pinchas did a mitzvah. What the mitzvah was, we can talk about it. We'll get there soon. It's soon in the parsha. The brain, the heart, intellect, maybe all the same thing. Depends how you're talking. Tanya clearly wants to divvy it up to explain. Intellect, the repository of self-concept and wisdom is the intellect. The heart is the seat of the emotions. The thought, the brain is what houses the intellect. The willful thought is, we're saying you can choose whether to allow a pop-up thought or desire to go further or not. You don't have to, you can push it away, you cannot let it in. The brain, the heart could be euphemism, not in this context though. Any other questions? Oh, fright or flight. How do you say fright or flight? So you said we have survival instinct that sometimes makes us do things. I'll tell you a quick story, and I got to run because I have to lead the services for Mincha. The Alter Rebbe he supported the Tsar in the Napoleonic War against Russia. And he actually had one of his Hasidim, Rav Moshe Meislis, who was a linguist, infiltrate the French camp because the French conquered parts of Russia, and that part he was in. And he was a multilingual, so he was of great asset to them. They thought the Jews would be pro them because they were going to throw the Tsarist yoke away. Long story there. And he infiltrated them. And because he could translate Russian, Yiddish, and to French, they let him in, they utilized him as a translator. The story goes one time in the very meeting of generals of tactical planning, Napoleon actually walked in. And Napoleon sized up who's there, and he saw this Jew. And he was concerned maybe he's a spy. So Napoleon did a quick polygraph test. He put his hand on Moshe Meisler's heart and said, "You're a spy." And Moshe Meisler was totally cool and says, "Your Highness, I'm here to help. I was hired as a translator." And Napoleon saw his heart was calm, and he let him go, and he stayed in that cabinet meeting getting more secrets for the Russian government. And he said later that Tanya saved his life because it taught this principle, that the mind rules the heart. At that split second, did he think mystically, like I'm ready to die for God, whatever happens, happens? He just remembered that there's a human ability, the mind can control the way the heart. He was petrified, but he was able to. So I guess the point is that fight or flight, if we're going to make ourselves do the wrong action, whatever that might be in that situation, it's probably some level of giving it to the animal soul based on that story. I'm going to have to sign off. Thank you all for joining. We're going to read chapter 13, perhaps chapter 13 and 14 next week, but read chapter 13 for now. Have a wonderful week. And maybe notice over the week, the homework, notice if your choices, how slow you are, and all the best. Be well.